working on a mutual client out of New Mexico, and that client dropped Delta Dental last year. They lost 1,000 Delta patients last year as a result of going out of network. But get this, they gained 500 new patients, and none of them were Delta. When you're dropping insurance, you gotta consider the things that you mentioned, especially the part on being skilled at being able to capture people, potential new patients.
Here's the problem. People are like, I'm sick and tired of insurances. Okay, I'm going out of network, and then I'm gonna figure all this stuff out. No. Stop. Get your plan in place. You have to put these things into place before you go out of network. Welcome back to another episode of Dental Marketing Theory. I'm your host, Gary Bird. I'm the founder of SMC National, where we help offices like yours level the playing field against the big guys out there so you can grow the way that you want, but you can't grow if the insurance companies are not paying you what you're worth and your business is actually suffering from it. And today I have Benjamin, who is the president of Veritas Dental Resources, and we're going to talk about the pitfalls of going out of network, when you should do it, when you shouldn't, and some things that you really need to consider before you even think about it. So you're going to want to stay tuned. This is a very, very value-packed episode. Stay tuned. All right, we are live, and I'm excited to have this conversation with Ben. Ben, why don't you tell me what the number one thing that you're seeing offices use to grow their practices right now?
That's a great question, Gary. So from my worldview, I deal primarily in the space of insurance, dental insurance in the dental practice. So when I look at it from that lens, Gary, a couple things come to mind. Number one, out-of-network transitions with a good marketing plan has proven to be very beneficial. And what I mean by that, Gary, is there's a great, well, we all have frustrations with insurance, but there's a sort of a momentum, a wave, a culture of out-of-network that's going on.
You've probably noticed this before, but this podcast is unsponsored. What that means is we don't get paid to do it, but we want to bring you the best information possible. So how do we make sure that this content stays on the air? We need you to like and subscribe. Wherever you're at, whatever you're listening on, just give us a thumbs up or subscribe, and that helps us out so much. I know that you probably haven't done it, so I'm just going to sit here and wait until you do. 95% of our listeners have not subscribed to our podcast. So go ahead and do it now. Don't make this awkward. All right, good. Back to the show.
Doctors are just not tolerating insurance contracts anymore these days for the many reasons that we know in terms of the why, low fees, denying this, denying that, forcing you to spend an enormous amount of your payroll to get claims paid. So doctors are leaving networks, but the mistake that a lot of practices don't consider when they go out of network is they don't consider a new patient replacement mechanism, right? Or at least path. When you're in network, arguably, there are some practices that do see a lot of patients from the in-network directories, right? They get referred by the insurance company and so forth. And when you drop insurance, that goes away. And so in general, out of network, in terms of the numbers, look really good for most practices. With Delta, you're seeing an average rate of attrition at about 19%. Most other dental plans, the rate of retention is 81% attrition, 19% with Delta. With every other dental plan, attrition is less than 10%, with 90+% in terms of overall retention of patients. But you still have to focus on, in my opinion, to plan for the 4 to 5 year picture down the road, which is new patients, right? And for practices that do that successfully, and they have that new patient mechanism that's replacing the in-network mechanism that they got rid of, 4 or 5 years from now, you do tend to see numbers sort of on a nice steady increase for those practices compared to many practices that drop insurance. They have 4 years of really great revenue and profitability, and then all of a sudden their new production starts to decline because they cut off new patients when they went out of a network with insurance 4 years ago, So for me, that's probably a big area is dropping insurance. But on the other part is for those that are not ready to drop insurance, negotiating your fees and playing the umbrella network game with insurance, it'll add another 7 to 13% to your bottom line. So those are the two areas of insurance that I'm seeing, Gary. And to answer your question on what's helping these days with practices in terms of increased revenue and profitability.
Yeah, there's a couple of thoughts I have on that. So, and I would love your feedback on it. So, number one, there's certain states where Delta Dental is paying less than Medicaid. And it's getting worse and worse and worse, right? I just also read there's a class action lawsuit that's being considered. This was on the ADA's website against Delta Dental because of antitrust stuff, allegedly. So I'll say that when I put that out there. So, but the article's out there. You can go check it out. And I just posted it in Dental Nachos. It's really, really interesting. Okay. Here's my take on it. I just had a dentist reach out today and said, Gary, 64% of my new patients are coming from Delta Dental, and I can't do it anymore. I can't afford to do it anymore. So I have to go out of network. I'm like, man, that's crazy. That's a lot. Have you really thought through this? And what I gave him was my 3-step process how I see it. And keep in mind, I'm the marketing guy. So I have a skewed perspective of all of this, but I think there's the 3 M's. There's the market that your office is in. There's the marketing of your practice, and then there's the motivation of your team. You can't go out of network. If you're heavily in network and then you try to go out of network and you do not consider those 3 things, you're not going to be able to replace your patients, because there are a lot of people who've tried to go out of network out there who have failed, and they go back into network. And that's probably even more defeating than this particular topic. And so let's just work through those really quickly. So you have the market. Why does that matter? Well, if you're in a low income area where everybody relies on insurance, or even a lower class, or lower middle class area where it's very blue collar, and they've worked at their steel mill for the last 50 years and they have that insurance, you're probably not going to be able to go out of network there. That's just the nature of those locations. So you have to identify that there's people in that market who have the money to afford treatment and aren't going to be as tied to their insurances. Okay, that's number one. That's the most important thing. Yep. Number 2, you have to have a way that you can market predictably. If you've never marketed before, that means you don't have a predictable marketing system. And you actually have to get that in place first before you go out and network. If you try to do it the other way around, you're just going to end up bumping your head and trying to figure it out. Marketing's not easy. Marketing's actually very, very complicated now, especially with all the competition, big DSOs, big budgets, those kind of things. It's gotten a lot harder. That's number 2. And then number 3, your team has to be trained on how to handle these kind of marketing patients, because that part's not easy either. And it's not like insurance patients where they're just like, do you take my insurance? Yes. Okay, great. That's easy. Anybody can do that. These are going to be patients that have more complicated questions, and your team actually has to be trained verbally how to deal with those, both on the phones and in the treatments when they're presenting treatment. What are your thoughts on that as you hear that?
Yeah, no, I like that. I think the way you kind of outline it is fantastic, especially on the marketing side. So what comes to mind, Gary, is I actually just spoke to a friend of mine. His name is Bob Spill. He's probably one of the best coaches on leadership in the industry that I've seen so far. So we're working on a mutual client out of New Mexico, and that client dropped Delta Dental last year. Well, we ran the numbers. It's a big practice. I think they do closer to 10 million or so, single location. They lost 1,000 Delta patients last year as a result of going out of network. But get this, they gained 500 new patients, and none of them were Delta. They actually needed to lose 1,000 patients because they're booked out almost 8 months with their hygiene schedule. Their restorative is booked out almost 2 months. So it's very difficult to make room for patients, right? But when they went through this activity, the part that you mentioned about you need to know how to communicate with these patients that don't have Delta or have a different dental plan or don't have insurance whatsoever. Because what I see a lot of, Gary, in many practices, I'm not a marketing expert, but when I look at the numbers and I hear the phone calls in terms of marketing, a lot of times there's so many calls that come in, but the conversion on getting those people scheduled is very low in many practices, or the phone is not even being answered at all. And these are patients, when you try to call them back, they've already scheduled with somebody else, And so you miss out on those opportunities. You're spending the marketing dollars, but you're not converting appropriately in terms of the opportunity, right? Lots of calls coming in, very few people landing on your schedule. So for this practice in New Mexico, they had that down. They had that nailed down. in terms of whenever they answer their phones at night and on the weekends. They would have a team member take a cell phone home that the office phone is forwarded to that phone. But the biggest thing that we noticed is that dropping Delta was a really good thing for them. Had they not had a team that was prepared to really convert the phone calls from their marketing effort, that 500 could have been 100, 200, which is what you typically see in many practices, is that they would get, 30 or 40 different new patient calls, but they only have 2 scheduled, 2 to 5 scheduled from those calls. You know what I mean? So yeah, I like what you said, because it's very important. It's one of those things that when you're dropping insurance or making or trying to beef up the practice from a new patient perspective, you got to consider the things that you mentioned, especially the part on being skilled at being able to capture people, potential new patients. And then adding to that, I see marketing things, maybe you'd love your thought on this, Gary, where it says this promotion that the patient is receiving only applies to one person. But somebody with a family of 6, it's like, well, it only applies to me. Well, I'll go to the next office, right? So you're sort of limiting your opportunities with how your messaging is on whatever promotion that you're pushing out to the public,
It has to be aligned. Yeah, you have to have aligned on your marketing, your front desk, what you're treating. You have to have all that. You have to. Here's the problem. People are like, I'm sick and tired of insurances. Got it. I get it. Okay, I'm going out of network, and then I'm going to figure all this stuff out. No. Stop. Get your plan in place. Get somebody. And people are like, can you consult me? No, this is not what I do for a living. I can help you drive the new patients. I can even help coach your team on what to say and when to say it. But you have to put these things into place before you go out of network. One of the things that we offer to everybody, we do this for our clients, and somebody who is like, hey, maybe I would use you, is we build out maps. So we build out these amazing maps where we actually plot out you can get all of your insurance patients. So all your Delta Dental patients, let's say if you're going out of network with them or another insurance, and you can actually plot it out on a map and you can see where they're coming from. So then you can say, well, and you can put it against income. So you can have the background of the map be income and go, okay, here's where all these people are coming from. Here's where I want to attract people now, and then actually market to those people. And you can tell if there's actually opportunity for you to be making this kind of decision with the location of your practice. So that's something that we do for everybody that seems to work really well and make it easier. Because let's be honest, as you and I are sitting here talking about this and we're creating all these problems for people to make decisions, we didn't actually solve anything. We just made it more complicated, right? We made it a little bit harder for them. So that's one thing I want to throw out the lifeline for people, is that's one thing that we do. What are some things that you do that kind of help people make this easier for them from a problem solving standpoint?
Yeah, problems. Yeah, great question. Of course, we want to, as you mentioned, you want to have a plan in place. So you want to start with analytics. And what I do for anybody that comes to me, and normally people come to us for insurance help. I have problems with my fees. I want to drop some insurance plans. We get a lot of doctors that come to us and say, I need to drop insurance. But when we do the analytics, it's very clear that they're not ready. They need to work on the numbers a little bit more, or at least address something else. So we see some practices that, for instance, are understaffed. They barely have anybody to answer the phone up front. So all of their calls are going to voicemail, as an example. You have these small dynamics that's like, well, that's not going to be very helpful for you if you're going to go out of network. You don't have the right staffing to convey the right messaging to people. So not yet, but you do have opportunities here on the fee schedule side of things that could be improved. That'll give you another 10% to your bottom line that might be helpful, right? So as we're sort of working on the low-hanging fruit of what they're ready for, I usually either steer towards negotiating fees or cleaning up how they're credentialed. Like I think you're in California, is that right, Gary? A good example is like Blue Shield of California. You can credential with them through United Healthcare, Dynamax, connection. You have 5 different ways to credential, and all 5 different ways have 5 different fee schedules, right? So to me, if it's a client that's not ready to go out of network, we want to look at those things in the initial analytics process to see what is an easier path towards increasing revenue for the practice in a way that's not going to stress out the doctor, but also to get them ready for the ultimate goal, which could be, I want to start dropping out of some of these PPO plans over time. And the numbers and assessing your metric, what you want to measure in terms of key performance indicators, those things have to be aligned in order for a doctor to have a more successful outcome transitioning out of network. So we usually push that out sometimes maybe a year to 2 years, just depending on the practice dynamics when we initially evaluate them.
Awesome stuff. I love it. Ben, if someone says, you know what, I want to learn more about this, I want to see if this is the right fit for me, how can somebody get in touch with you and learn more about your business?
Yeah, great question. And thanks for that opportunity, Gary. So you can visit us at veritasdentalresources.com. Veritas is a parent company for 3 different businesses. The other 2, there's Verus Dental, VERUS. That's an insurance verification company. And then there's hiddendentalprofit.com. And that's our coaching division that handles revenue cycle management on both the dental and medical side of things, but more so coaching on those areas to help practices be more efficient. For instance, I see numbers that come from coaching clients all the time where their hygienists were producing 600 to 800 a day and now producing 1,700 to 2,500 a day. They're not changing what they're doing clinically. They're just understanding the billing dynamics a lot better in an effort to bill appropriately for things that they're already doing, in the hygiene share. And so that hidden dental profit focus on that, amongst many other things, coding and billing to improve practice profitability. But in general, if you visit veritasdentalresources.com, we have links to those other companies as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a fun conversation, and look forward to continue to help people out there. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Gary. It's been an honor.